I hope you all had a remarkable evening. And so let's go ahead and get started this morning. First, share with me what happened good in your lives yesterday.
I got to leave work early.
Okay. And what did you do with your time?
I spent it sitting in Alan's hospital room.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hoping he recovers quickly from whatever he's dealing with.
Yeah, me too. He's whining. And when he is ill, he is a big baby.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share anything that happened good yesterday?
We posted one of the rental properties that we have for sale. So for those who don't know, we have a duplex that's coming on the market, a half duplex that's been renovated, and a fourplex for sale. And so I've been posting them on Facebook investor groups and have been getting 20 to 30 email addresses to forward the information to every single time.
Beautiful.
And what groups are you posting those in, Ben Lobby?
A few that you told me about, and then a few that I found.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have a win from yesterday?
I had a contractor, an electrician, go out to my Dresden property because we're trying to negotiate the seller, giving money towards repairs at closing. I called the guy, he was local, and he went out there. And he said he's going to give me my estimate, send me an email, all that good stuff. I get the estimate, and it is for the interior electrical panel. And I asked him to do the exterior electrical panel. And he also did not have the estimated cost. So the lesson I learned is to be there when you have a contractor giving you an estimate, because I just don't understand how that happened. But yeah, that's my lesson.
So now what then? You have to have the contractor go back out?
Yeah, different one. I'm calling a different one. He missed that one.
Oh, okay.
Wait, a contractor not following directions? What?
I know.
Your standards are way too high, Angelica.
I see. I am starting to learn this.
Oh, I had, well, I mean, not a huge win, but a win, yeah, 2 wins from yesterday, actually. I finally, big news, you guys, like seriously, I'm under contract on my mobile home. Like huge.
Yay.
Wait, not only are you under contract, but you had multiple offers on it this weekend.
I did. I've gone for months with nothing. And all of a sudden I've got showings left, right, and sideways. I had 2 offers that came in like on the same day. And so the really cool thing about this whole thing is that there is an agent who has shown this house, I don't know how many times now, 4, 5, 6, something like that. And she's actually buying it for herself. Like she's seen it over and over again and she just decided to buy it. So whatever, but I've had this damn thing listed since March. I am so ready to be done with this thing. Like seriously. That was one. And the other one was much smaller. So a while ago, I told you about this house that I'm under contract with for a buyer, and the garage door wouldn't open, and the sellers agreed to either repair or replace it, depending on what's most cost effective for them. And I have the signed addendum saying they'll do it. So hooray.
Well, I have another win. Jadell told me that I was listed for one of the top 2021 top producers for the Alliance group. Not EXP Alliance, the LGBTQ Alliance, by the way. So, whoa.
Wait, a top producer?
Yeah.
What's your sales volume?
I don't know.
I think it's 10 million. I think it's over 10 million at this point.
It was last year. I think they were using last year's metrics.
So what number or rank are you?
I don't know if the list had a rank.
Oh, they just give like top 20.
Yeah, you just like you hit a certain benchmark and then you qualify. Yeah. So do you have
top 200 too?
Do
They
what?
do the top 200. They do the top 200 as well.
Oh, see, Scott knows.
And, oh, by the way, if anyone wants to join it, there's a discount code for $50.
And what we're referring to is the Real Estate Alliance. I'll put a link in the chat. I put a group on, or I put something in Slack yesterday. But if you are LGBTQ or an ally, you can join the Real Estate Alliance, which is replacing NAGLREP, the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. Say that 20 times fast. Unfortunately, the Real Estate Alliance, they canceled their Vegas conference this year. So they're going to save up more money and apparently make it even better next year. But you can join as an individual, put you on their directory. You can apply for their awards. They have a video on their website, but the link is in the chat if you want to check it out.
Does it show the criteria for being in the top 20? Or
Um,
Oh my God, you're so funny, Nick.
all he cares about is the trophy.
I know.
care about the trophy, care about the numbers.
Let me see if here, Nick. Here we go. I found the page. I'm gonna put that in the chat just for you. So as an individual agent, you must have closed 25 to 49 sides or 10 to 20 million in sales volume in 2020. Or as a team, you do 15 to 30 million. So this year for 2021, we will qualify as a top producing team because we're already over 30 million. And this year, if you do at least 10 million, Nick, then you will also qualify as an individual agent.
Okay, cool.
But the application was, they did the application in July for 2020. So it's not going to be until summer 2021 summer 2022 they'll do the application for 2021. Does that make sense?
Yes.
A lot of these organizations, just heads up, they'll do their award application before their conference, and then they'll give the awards at the conference. This year they canceled the conference, so I don't know if I get a trophy or anything. Kind of lame. I got a social media post.
All right. Well, then if anything comes up, I'm sure we'll have time at the end. But for now, Ben, when you're ready, take it away.
Fantastic. Turn on your cameras, people. This is going to be a fun, engaging time. And I want to see more beautiful faces so I don't have to stare at myself because I don't like doing that.
Oh, please.
Sweet. Yes. Oh, you guys are so pretty and diverse. I love our group of people. Awesome. So we have a conversation today is all about completing the loan application, right? So how many of you, raise your hands, the people who I can't see, I don't count. So raise your hand if you have had a buyer get qualified for a mortgage, right? Okay. And how many of you, as yourselves, you personally have bought a house or completed a mortgage application? Okay. So like that's 50% of the first group. Okay, cool. So only half of you have actually seen a mortgage application, right? At one point in time. Okay, so that's why we're going to go through this, because we tee up our buyers and we introduce our buyers to a great mortgage lender, and we say, go to this mortgage lender and then apply. And then they apply, but we don't necessarily tee up what they need to do that mortgage application. We don't show them the mortgage application typically, that's all handled by the lender. So part of this conversation is going to show you guys what the mortgage loan application looks like. So you have a reference point. So you know what information is typically collected by the lender, so that when you prep your buyer, you will prep them with, and they will know what information they need to have together in order to complete that loan application, right? So if you haven't bought a house in the recent years, a lot of this changed in roughly, I'm going to say like 2014 and 15 and 16, right? So let's backtrack, right? The mortgage crisis occurred in 2007, 8, 9 due to subprime lending and unqualified buyers being able to get mortgages that they weren't qualified for. And during that period, a lot of people went underwater because mortgage lenders and banks were lending loans to people who couldn't afford them, and they were not clarifying what a ARM was, right? An adjustable rate mortgage. So nowadays, you don't see adjustable rate mortgages as much. Can anyone quickly explain what an adjustable rate mortgage is?
I don't know the criteria that they base it on, but I just know that it means that the lender can adjust the rate at will, up or down.
Okay.
There are
Loans.
limits as to how much it can be adjusted in
Yeah.
a period of time, right?
Mm-hmm. So an adjustable rate mortgage is typically a flat rate mortgage in the beginning, and then at a certain point it adjusts, right? So typically an adjustable rate mortgage would be written as a 5/1 ARM, right? So what that means is the interest rate would be flat, right, for the first 5 years, and then it would adjust, right? And so the definition is based off of how many times does the adjustable rate, how many times does the rate adjust, right? So if it's a 5/1 ARM, then the interest rate is fixed for the first 5 years, and then after that, the rate is adjusted annually, right? So this was a good idea in the beginning because everyone was like, oh yeah, you'll get this super low interest rate now. It'll be fixed for the first 5 years, and then you can refinance it into a conventional mortgage. Well, then the market crashed and you couldn't do that. And that's why a lot of people were underwater, right? So we don't see adjustable rate mortgages anymore. We see mostly just conventional FHA, VA, or USDA loans, right? So when filling out a loan application, we want to know what the buyer has to have available for them to complete that application. Now, what I'm going to show you is the actual form, right? So it's a uniform residential loan application. So this form was created in, like I said, after the 2007 crash, when TRID came into effect. TRID was all this additional regulations so that mortgage lenders could disclose properly to buyers, right? So in the old days, you wouldn't necessarily know how much money you had to bring to closing until you got to closing. And then they would say, write a check for this amount, right? Nowadays, if you've done any transactions, you know that you have a 3-day waiting rule, right? So there's 3 documents that the lender provides the buyer. The first one is the loan estimate. The loan estimate is provided to the buyer within 3 days of completing the loan application. The loan estimate discloses the interest rate, the estimated closing costs, and looks very similar to the closing disclosure. The closing disclosure comes in 2 parts. There's the initial closing disclosure, which is given to the buyer 3 days prior to closing, and then 3 business days after that initial closing disclosure is received, signed, and returned, then the buyer can close, and they have the 3rd document, which is the final closing disclosure. All 3 of those documents use the same exact format, right? It's the same exact template. They just have different names, and the numbers will adjust as they get refined through the transaction process, right? So all this disclosing process, all this disclosure on the lending side was a part of TRID, which was the part of the Truth in Lending Act, right? Also a part of RESPA. So there's a whole segment of laws that were created out of those 708 crash. Does anyone have any questions about those disclosures before we jump into this? No, cool. So this loan application, what you see is visibly what is printed out on paper. However, when people actually go to apply, right, a lot of lenders have other portals that are set up, or easy question portals. So it may not be in this exact format, but the same information is collected, right? So what typically happens is the lender will, we'll send the lender to an application. They'll start the application, and we can probably pull up Tim's actually. If someone finds me his link, I can show you what his portal looks like. And then once the application is completed, the data that they complete in the web interface is then put onto this document. And then at closing, this document is actually on the table and the buyers have to sign it, right? So even though they did just sign it or they digital sign it in the beginning, when they complete the loan application, the lender always wants them to sign it again at closing. Nuanced information, you don't really need to know about that. So let's go through the loan application. So the first part, when you're talking to your buyer and they're filling this out, they obviously need to not lie on this document because mortgage fraud is a federal crime. Fun fact. Step 2, they obviously need their identification information, whether it's a social security number or a TIN if they have a tax identification number and they don't have a social security number, their birth date, define if they're a citizen or alien resident alien. And then if they're applying individually or jointly, right? So maybe it's a couple and they're applying jointly and they're both applying together versus one of them applying. When we talk about applying individually or jointly, sometimes where a couple may want to apply jointly is if they are going to need to qualify based off of both incomes together or credit scores together, right? So Judy and Roger come to you and they say, well, Judy's credit score is really low and Roger's credit score is really high, but Judy makes more money. She just doesn't spend it as well as Roger does, right? How should we apply? You should say you guys should probably apply together, and the lender can make a recommendation if one of you should be on the application versus the other, right? Because what they'll do is they'll take both credit scores of the individuals as that couple, and they'll average them together, right? They'll also take both incomes and they'll take both debt loads or whatever's on their credit report to do a joint debt to income ratio calculation, right? Now, maybe it's a different situation. We had this recently with a couple of ours. One of them was a business owner, right? And one of them worked in medical. So the one that was a business owner, he wrote off everything that the business came in. So on paper, he made no money. His partner worked in medical and had a W-2 high-paying job, right? So we left the business owner off because that would complicate the applications. And then the high wage earner was the only one who applied, and the mortgage and everything was in his name. Now, the common question when we have that conversation is, well, we will both want to be on title. That's okay. Most of the time, one of them can be the borrower and both people can be on the title document. The title company has to be informed, right? A common question the title company asks is, are you married? If you're married, you're both on title, right? But the title company just has to be told that. Any questions about that? I'm going to be bouncing around a lot of information today.
So when they're not married, but they want to be together in the title.
They're not married and they want to be together on title, they definitely need to inform the title company properly. There's and this is a question that we'll have to have our title agent come on, and Lee's going to make a note of this. There's different ways to have title set up for home ownership, right? So it's joint tenancy, right? Or tenancy with the right of survivorship.
Aren't there there's 4 or 5 different kinds, right?
Yeah, there are, but those are the top 2 for couples. So we'll have a title company explain the nuances, but at that point in time, when we are talking about these nuances, those are the point of times where it's great for you guys to know the information, but you also need to know when to say, hey, you guys should definitely talk to the title company about that. Right? Because we're not advising them on how they should take title. We just know ways they could take title. And then we advise them to talk to the person, the title company, who should be advising them on the best way to take title. Right? The other resource when it comes to how to take the property in regards to title is an estate attorney, right? So if a buyer is concerned about how title is done, they should definitely be talking to an estate attorney. Because this is all about planning, right? What happens if someone passes away or a relationship is broken? That person should be advising on how they should plan how to take title. Does that make sense, Kelly?
Yeah, so I have a question. Does a lender ever have a say in that? In other words, if maybe the people buying want to be joint tenants in common, and the lender's like, nope, I only want the person like we're loaning to be on the title. They can say that. Of course, the person may walk away and go to another lender, but is that possible for them to dictate?
It is possible. Sometimes the lender, if two people are in title, and this is where it gets kind of in the gray area, and there's variations between the lenders and the title company. If two people are on title, both people will probably have to be on the mortgage. But sometimes the lender will word it as we have the borrower, and then we have a they call it a occupying non-borrower, right? But that person is still responsible for the mortgage, but not used to qualify for the mortgage, right? So this whole title conversation of how you're going to do title is something that should happen with the title company and also the lender. Now, if someone's a borrower, right, this rarely happens, but say that you have two co-borrowers, then both of them have to be on title. The lender's not going to let one of them not be on title. Any other questions about that? Cool. So going back to the application, right? So they're going to define if they're applying as an individual or if they're applying jointly, their marital status, how many dependents they have, what the ages of their dependents are, the contact information they're going to use, their current address, and then all previous addresses, right? Most importantly here, they talk about employment information, right? So they need to know where they're employed, if they're self-employed, if they own the company, if they're self-employed, and what the monthly income is, right? So lenders always do their calculations, their debt to income ratio calculations based off monthly gross income and monthly expenses. The monthly gross income is discovered or determined by either their W-2s, that's the easiest, or an average of their 1099 income over 12 months, or an average of their 1099 income over 2 years if they're self-employed. Okay, so if they're self-employed, they automatically need 2 years of tax returns. There's other ways around that, but the simplest is 2 years of tax returns. And then the lender will average those together, assuming that those 2 years are increasing in income. And then they will divide it by 12 to determine what the buyer's monthly gross income is. And when we talk about monthly expenses, right, they are only looking at monthly expenses that show up on the borrower's credit report, right? So if you are paying some best friend of yours off from totaling their car, that does not show up on your credit report. So that is not included in the lender's calculation. So anything that shows up on your credit report, any alimony, any IRS liens or payments, all those things would be going into the person's debt to income ratio calculations, and they take the monthly amount. If the person is employed in multiple areas or multiple jobs, there are 2 spots for that, right? If we talk about overtime, someone says, oh, I make $14 an hour, but I'm paid overtime, right? Does anyone know how overtime is calculated from a income standpoint on a mortgage application?
I didn't think it was included at all because it's variable, but
Do they take the average over the course of the entire year?
Yes. Yep. So overtime can count, but they have to see a track record for it, right? So they will take the average over a long period of time. And there are some nuances between lender to lender, right? So that's kind of hard to say whether it's 1 year or 2 years or the last 24 months. But if someone says, oh, I just started this part-time job and I work 20 hours a week, but I also work another 25 hours a week, and the 25 hours a week is overtime, there's a red flag for you. Because 1, they just started the job, and 2, half of their time is overtime, and it's going to be very hard for them to get the right documentation to the lender for the lender to say that this is qualified income, right? And a question that Lee's going to write down for our lender partner when they come on later is to define qualified income. So that you guys know up front when you're talking to your buyers, you can have these conversations and initially qualify them and hopefully get an idea of whether they're actually going to qualify or not. So if they haven't been at their current job for 2 years and they have to put in their previous job information. There's typically not a problem if someone hasn't been at a job for 2 years, as long as they're in the same industry for 2 years, right? Or their current job is better than their previous job from an income standpoint. Other sources of income that are tracked, right? So if they want the income to qualify, you can see right here, the note, right? Reveal alimony, child support, separate maintenance, or other income only if you want it considered in determining your qualification for this loan. So if I'm getting alimony, do I need to disclose it to the lender? No. But if I need that money, if I need that income because I don't make enough from my job, then I do want to disclose it, and I need to provide paperwork to prove that I have alimony for a period of time to use that income to qualify. Same thing for foster care, disability, child support, interest and dividends, Social Security, royal payments, so on and so forth. Those are all other sources of income outside of employment income, right? So the lender is always going to start with employment income, and then you can use these other sources of income to qualify as well. Any questions about that?
Not to sound silly, but it's a question that I have. So you're saying that the women or the male can disclose that they're receiving, but won't they check that for child support for the debt to income ratio, or am I confused?
Yes, they can disclose that they are receiving it, and they will have to provide documentation supporting that they are receiving it.
But when for the debt to income ratio calculation for the monthly expensive, aren't they going to check that anyways? Or do they not check for that?
For the monthly expenses?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
she means
for
for the
the-
person paying it.
For the person paying it.
Like you're the person paying the child support. Doesn't that count as your monthly, as one of your monthly expenses, or no?
It does. That is a really great question. So thank you for asking. Don't think it's a silly question. I think Lee should notate this question for when Juan comes on. And just to clarify, the question would be, or how I would word it is, how is child support or alimony recorded, and where would it show up on the debt side of a debt to income ratio calculations, and is it publicly known? I kind of have a feeling that, can't you find that out publicly based on court records? I actually don't know. So we'll check on that. That's a great question, Arielis.
Okay. Because I was just wondering, like, let's say the child support is like on the high end, like, won't that affect your debt to income ratio and like could possibly deny you from getting a loan? That's just my main point.
It should. We'll scroll down.
I would think so.
Yeah.
If you're
'Cause
paying
usually
it,
it's
yes. If you're receiving it, it would be great.
Exactly. But if you are the one, yeah, I would think it affects your DTI for sure, because I mean, that's like
So
a few hundreds.
And actually, I can say I'm pretty sure it's public record, because one of the guys way back, lead, didn't say anything about it. And I think the lender came back and said, red flag, we found there's money back, child support owed, and he needs to account for that, like pay it up to get a loan.
yeah, so a partial answer to Ariel's question is it is on the loan application right here under section 2. We switch over to liabilities, right? So you have to disclose. It's not like they just pull your credit and they go based on that. You actually have to actively disclose any of your liabilities, including installment loans, which would be a car loan, student loans, personal loans, any credit cards, any leases, right? Whether that's a business lease or a car lease or anything like that. And you're supposed to be disclosing any alimony, child support, separation, maintenance, or job-related expenses that are on a monthly occurrence. Now, legally, you are required to disclose that on the loan application. So it should be disclosed up front. But Arielis has a great question is, if it's not disclosed, how does the lender find out about it? And Kelly's right, they do find out about it, but I'm very curious as to how they found out about it. So we'll have to ask Juan that when they come on.
Well, and I could be wrong. I think, he may have disclosed it, but he didn't disclose he was back. He had
owed.
not been paying it. They found that out somehow.
Yeah.
So it is attached to the credit report. And a lot of employers, when they ask for the credit report, that's what they ask for it, because they're required by law to pay that debt directly to who they owe it to and not directly to the employee. So there are some loopholes. Like if you have, it doesn't technically go in collections because it's like a criminal offense to not pay it. But it is supposed to be posted in a credit report because, like I said, like if they, or if they win any lottery money or anything like that, I know that it shows in their credit report because that's the debt that has to be paid first, before their salary.
Oh, good to know. Thank you, Lito. So when you guys are prepping your buyers, right, to complete this loan application, they're like, well, what do I need for the loan application? Right? Just have this checklist in your mind, right? You need to know, one, all sources of your income that you're going to be using in order to qualify for the loan. 2, you're going to need to list out all of the assets that you're going to use in order to pay your cash to close, down payment, or deposit. Right? That's what this asset section is for. Are you using your checking or savings account, or are you pulling from money from a money market account? So on and so forth, right? And this section is asked about things you own that are worth money that you want to be considered for the qualification of the loan. So in regards to assets, in reality, you only need to disclose how much you need to qualify, right? So if you have 15 accounts with millions and millions of dollars in them, you only need to list one because you probably only need one to qualify, right? But you should prep your buyers that they should have this documentation readily available. Now, when they list an account on here, right, if they list a checking account or a savings account, the institution, the account number, and the amount, the lender is going to want documentation for that account. And that would be bank statements or money market monthly statements, right? Because they want to show the money in that account. So let's talk about seasoned money. Does anyone know what seasoned money is?
I think it is money that has to be in an account for 30 days. If it's less than that, it's questionable. They question where it came from. I'm not
It's
sure.
not 6 months.
2 months. That's what Tim told us. Because I love the term season money.
Well, I'm curious now because lender told Gala it needs to be 6 months for the alimony, like to season on her account before.
So that's different.
Okay.
Alimony is different. Scott, he's unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Oh, I didn't know I was unmuted. Sorry, driving.
So seasoned money, if I'm using money for a deposit, down payment, or cash to close, seasoned money is money that is in an account for 2 statements. So it's not 30 or 60 days. It's actually 2 statement cycles, right? So if I have $20,000, right, in a savings account, but I just put the money there like yesterday, the lender is going to either want to see that money in that account for 2 statements or they're going to want to know where that money was prior to it getting into my savings account. And the reason for that, reason my money has to be seasoned or washed, is because they want to make sure I didn't go down to the street corner and get it in some other unprofessional manner, right? Your money needs to be seasoned, and you have to show a paper trail of that.
Not being a wise guy, what is the difference? Oh, what is the difference? Sorry. What is the opposite of seasoned money? Like transient money? I mean, it could possibly be transient, I guess. So
Dirty.
Bland?
Dirty.
Dirty money. I can't.
Blind monies. That's actually a good one.
No, bland.
Bland.
Seasoned, bland. Get it?
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go. Yeah, okay. Wise crack joke for the day. Thank you, Lee. Could have done better on your dad joke for the morning. Nick,
Question. So season money, even for like the deposit, like does a lender check, like if you have a $2,000 deposit, the lender's going to check to make sure that that $2,000 has been sitting in account for at least 2 months or
yeah.
two?
So if, say, I'm in a bind, right? I just went under contract. I got to put my $2,000 deposit down. And I go to Lee and I peddle him a piece of paper and he gives me $2,000 and I deposit it and then I go and I wire that money to the title company, right? Sure, I've met my requirement of submitting that deposit to the title company, but when we get to underwriting, the lender's going to be like, where did this $2,000 come from? I'm going to be like, well, I bought Lee a coffee and he gave me $2,000 because Lee's loaded. And the lender's going to be like, we can't use that money toward your cash to close. So we can't even use that on your closing statement. You now need to bring another $2,000. Like, I've met the requirement of putting down my deposit from a contract standpoint, but that $2,000 is not qualified money or seasoned money that could be used for closing.
Okay.
Because they don't know if Lee was a drug dealer or if Lee just had a bake shop, right? They don't know where he got his money from.
But you can be gifted money, correct? And that is okay. So how do they differentiate unseasoned bland money and gifted money?
Great question. So if I'm gifted money for a deposit or a down payment, right? So Lee is my godfather and he says, Ben, I want to gift you money for your transaction. I said, oh my God, thank you, godfather. Fill out this form. There's a form from the lender that Lee signs that says, I, Lee, Ben's godfather, right? Because that person gifting the money has to be in some relation to the borrower. So I, Lee, Ben's godfather, is gifting $2,000 to Ben. Now, when we talk about gifted funds, there's two things to remember. One, Lee has to provide the same documentation of where that money is coming from. That money has to be seasoned in Lee's account, right? Because this whole point of this disclosure is making sure that Lee's not a drug dealer pulling money from off the streets, right? Or using illegal money to buy a house or help me buy a house, right? So one, Lee's money has to be seasoned, and two, Lee has to fill out that form, and three, we want gifted funds to be wired directly to the title company, right? We do not want Lee to give the money to me and then me give the money to the title company. Does someone know why?
That makes sense. Not exactly sure why, but sounds right.
It's all about the paper trail. If Lee sends me the money and then I give the money to the title company, I now have to show documentation of the money leaving Lee's account, entering my account, and then going to the title company, right? So it's just more documentation of watching where the money goes. But if Lee is gifting me funds as my godfather and wires the money directly to the title company, then that saves a lot of paperwork. Okay, so that's gifted funds. Let's go back to Mararis's question about alimony. She was talking about alimony payments, right? So if you are receiving alimony payments, or if we go back up here, right, if you are receiving these other sources of income, that you're using these other sources of income to qualify, depending on the source of income, you may need a track record of that income, right? So in Mararis's example, her customer is receiving alimony payments. So some lenders or most of them actually, will say, we need to see that you've been receiving that money for 6 months, at least 6 months, before we can call it qualified income. And we also need to know that you are going to be receiving that money for at least 2 or 3 years, right? And that's the only way they can use it for qualified income. So if I get a one-time bonus check, that's not qualified income because it happened once. Or what's very common, say we had a very fun customer who was in a lawsuit, right? And he was being paid a monthly on the settlement of a lawsuit. And so when we went to go get him qualified, they said, great, you can use this income from the settlement of this lawsuit. He was paid monthly for the settlement, but then they found out that he only had 23 months left on the payments that he was going to receive from the settlement. 23 months is 1 month shorter than 24 months. So the lender could not use that income as qualified income in order for him to qualify for the loan, right? So anytime you're receiving income from other sources besides employment income, you typically need to, the borrower needs to provide proof that that income is coming in for at least 2 to 3 years. And that kind of depends on the source of the income and the lender. Go for it, Lito.
I don't like to diss any drug dealers. And let's say that somebody's making a big chunk of money from an undisclosed source, but they're smart enough to have it seasoned in their bank account for at least 2 months. Will anyone, and they want to, would they question that if the money has been there for that long?
I don't think I can advise on what lenders will or will not do, or what they will or will not check on if there's a large chunk of money in someone's savings account that they've only had for 90 days.
All right.
I legit had someone on parole ask me about this very situation. Buy a house with $75,000 hard cash. So yeah.
So
these questions are real.
So you can't just show up to a title company in a suitcase of cash. Those days are gone, unfortunately. But you can take that money and deposit it into a savings account or multiple savings account at multiple banks. Because if you deposit more than $5,000 or $10,000 at one point in time to any savings account or bank, and it's a cash deposit, you will be flagged. Fun fact. This is not from personal experience, by the way. So if you do have a buyer who is, maybe they're coming into inheritance, right? Or they're coming into a large sum of money, whether it's something like that or a gift from a friend or whatever. The easiest way for them to qualify is for it to be documented and seasoned. And I would just tell them that, and then connect them with the lender, and they can explain the details to the lender.
And a lawyer.
And a lawyer, just in case.
So I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but all right. So say someone puts their deposit of $5,000, but they don't have a gifted agreement from their grandfather from that. Is there a way for that to be written after the deposit is submitted to say, hey, that money came from my grandfather, so that it's not flagged by underwriting and doesn't screw up the transaction?
Yes.
In my experience, they're still going to ask the grandfather where that came from, if it's a bunch of cash.
Yeah. You can definitely do the gift letter after the fact, but like Angeleca said, the grandfather's still going to have to provide statements showing where the money came from. Other questions?
What about, I have friends who are in their 70s and they don't work anymore. They get Social Security. The Social Security income itself probably isn't enough for them to qualify for a loan, but then they have all kinds of savings and all. Would they still be able to buy a home based on those savings and all? I guess they would, right?
So that's the cool thing, right? With mortgages and the inability to discriminate, right, is we can't actually discriminate people based on age. So if someone is 85 and buying a house, they can buy a house because we're going to assume they're going to live for the next 30 years.
But even without necessarily ongoing incoming income to cover it, just based on their assets and income.
So that would be a different, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say that would be a non-qualified mortgage. So it would be like a portfolio loan or an asset-backed mortgage. So it wouldn't be one of the like typical conventional mortgages that we would see on a regular basis. So some lenders will lend on that based off of low assets that the borrower has or collateral and low income, but the interest rate would be higher just because it's a different loan product. So it wouldn't be QM. It wouldn't be a qualified mortgage that Fannie or Freddie would buy. Lito?
No, thank you.
But they could always take that income and buy an annuity and then turn that sitting cash into kind of like an income stream in that standpoint. So section 3, financial information on the loan application. So your borrower is also going to need to provide information on all properties they currently own and what they owe on them. So all properties that they currently owe and what they owe on them needs to be listed. And Nick knows that when you are a real estate mogul like himself, qualification becomes a little bit more difficult. Tell us about that, Nick.
So when you have multiple properties and they're bringing in income and you don't want to pay taxes on that income, that can come to bite you in the butt. Because if you write off as much as you possibly can, so let's just say, for example, you gross $50,000 and you try to write off $45,000 worth of write-offs to only be taxed on $5,000, your tax returns are only going to show that you made $5,000. So you either suck it up and pay the taxes and show that your properties are cash flowing positively, or you don't pay taxes and not be able to qualify for another mortgage.
They'll always find a way to get their money.
Always.
Sooner or later.
For sure.
So borrower, who's on this call? Gavin. Gavin gives you a call and he's looking to get qualified for a mortgage. But Gavin's like, yeah, we want to buy our next house. We're upsizing. We're going to have a kid and we want a pool. And, we don't really want to sell our current property. Right. I just got an inheritance from my grandmother. She passed away, unfortunately. So we're going to celebrate and buy a house. Sorry. That's what grandma wanted. Okay. Calm down. And so we are going to upsize, but we want to keep our current property as a rental property. Someone tell me, how does keeping their current property as a rental property affect their debt to income ratio when they go to buy their next primary?
It's supposed to affect it positively because it's counted as part of your income.
That's if you're getting rent on that investment property, right?
So it's never been rented before.
Oh.
So didn't we, before you said, and I'm just taking a stab at it, that if they want to use that as rental income, they have to have a lease in place or like something in place to show how much they're going to get from it. And they can only count 70% of that income as, income.
That is great.
Angelica knows her stuff. Yes. Awesome.
Okay.
So you tell Gavin, I'm so excited to help you find your next big house. Just FYI, when you rent your current primary property, there's a few things you need. One, you have to give us a written executed lease while under contract on your purchase. right? The lease can start later, but it needs to be signed, it needs to be written, and there needs to be a real tenant. 2, we need a check for the security deposit. Most lenders will ask for that, right, from that tenant. And 3, whatever you rent your primary for, only 75% of that income will be included in your qualified income to offset the debt of that property. So Angeleca, we hit right on the head.
That's the struggle though, right? Finding tenants for a place that you have not secured yet.
Nick,
Right.
didn't you already do this with one of your properties with like Marauders or something?
Me?
Yeah, didn't you guys have to find a tenant for a property?
I did.
Oh, Lee.
I've done it 3 times, so yeah.
Well, how do you secure a tenant if you're still living in it? Like you can't move out of your home to the home you're buying until you bought it, but then you're supposed to have a lease for a tenant to start renting and give you security, and you're still in it. Like,
So
what?
typically we won't list the property for rent until they're under contract on what they're going to buy. So let's say they go under contract on what they're going to buy. We make that a 50-day close or 60-day close. We kind of do a little bit longer. And immediately once they're under contract, we list their current primary as a rental. We qualify, we find a tenant. That tenant signs a lease so that the move-in date is after the closing of what they're going to buy. So logistically, it's a fun mess.
And then pray to God that the closing happens on the same day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have a window in the lease so that the tenant can move in later if there's a delay or something. So. Cool. Is this information helpful? We're like running through a lot, and I just looked at the time. Oh my gosh. You guys are so talkative this morning.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Miracles happen when your cameras are on. So I'm going to run through the rest of this real fast. So they need to know the loan information on the property that they own, right? They have to disclose the current loan, what they think the value is, what the purpose of that current loan is, and what lien placement is. If they have income, right, or if what they're buying is going to be an income property, then they need to disclose what the income of that rental property is going to be. And then right here, we have that gifts section, right? So if they are going to get a gift from a relative, a religious nonprofit, a local agency, a federal agency, employer, or not community nonprofit, right? Those gifts can be listed here, whether they've been deposited or not deposited in the source. And then we have some declarations like down here about your finances. Are you a cosigner or a guarantor on any debt that is not disclosed, right? Are there any outstanding judgments against you? Those would be judgments from any settlement of any lawsuit. Are you currently delinquent or default in any federal debt? Are you a party of any lawsuit that you're personally responsible for, personally financially liable for, sorry? Have you conveyed property in lieu of foreclosure in the last 7 years? That's a huge red flag. Have you done any pre-foreclosure sale or short sale in the last 7 years? Right? Have you had a property foreclosed on in the last 7 years? And have you declared bankruptcy in the last 7 years? If so, which type? Right? Now, can you still qualify for a mortgage if you answer yes to some of these questions? Depends on the lender. There are certain lenders that you can still qualify for a mortgage as long as your bankruptcy was 3 years or later, right? Foreclosure is the sticky one. That's usually the hardest one to get past. Then there's a section about acknowledgements and agreements. Just goes through what the person is acknowledging. If there's military, that will be asked on the form as well. And then there's a whole demographic information. So section 8. They will be asked to disclose their ethnicity, their sex, and their race. The law provides that we will not discriminate. And if they don't fill out this information, then the mortgage loan originator fills this out based off of what they observe. Fun fact. And then the loan originator fills out their contact information. Any questions?
This was great. Very helpful.
All right. Share one thing you learned from today, either in the chat or blurb it out, just so we can recap before we disembark.
I learned about what I found really interesting, and what I learned is that the tax returns can come back and bite you, like if you're writing off a lot, because that's, I mean, everybody's main goals. Nobody wants to pay that much in taxes. Like Kelly said, they will and pay that much.
Lee learned flagging. You can be flagged when you make a large cash deposit into a savings account.
Damn it, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, same thing. That's really interesting.
I learned that they can average co-borrowers. I thought they just used the lowest of the two or something like that. So
They don't average income, but they average, credit scores.
Hey, a note on that large sum, it's 10,000 a day. If you go over 10,000 a day, you get flagged.
Thank you, AJ. I wasn't
You're
sure.
welcome.
I knew it
That
was
was my bank training.
So you can go back to the same bank the next day and it's okay? Another 10,000?
well,
Just
every
10,000.
time they're going to submit a form that has to be reviewed
If it's over 10,000.
every time.
Yep. But if you do $9,999, you don't have to fill out the form.
Correct.
And
But if
you
you
mentioned
do-
about overtime being averaged. Is that the same as like bonuses?
Yes.
Okay.
Bonuses, overtime, what's it called? If you're in sales, you get
Commission.
commission. Thank you. Commission. If it's not consistent, it is averaged. And
You know,
that's
what you work for.
that's like W-2. If you're W-2 and then you get commission on top, they take an average over a long period of time. Awesome. So you guys are all 1099 employees. So talk to your bookkeeper or your accountant now about how you should be completing your taxes this year, especially if you plan on buying a house next year. Plan ahead, right? Have that conversation. Or talk to your mortgage lender and just be like, how much income do I need to have in order to qualify for this house? And they'll help you do the math. Cool. I didn't hear you, Kelly.
Oops. Fun fact, that's how I became a lender for one of my best payers, is because they had already bought several rentals and the bank wouldn't lend them any more money. And he sends me a year's worth of checks for 2 rentals up front every year.
Yeah, we got our little bank in this group. Okay, Kelly.
Next time I'm going to say Godmother Kelly is gifting me funds.
Mhm.
A more accurate. All right, guys, go have an amazing day. I'll see some of you later at in-person workday. Otherwise, go kill it. If you have any questions, reach out on Slack or Workplace, and I'll see y'all later.
In-person workday is at 12:30.
12:30,
When do we join on Zoom?
12:45.
Okay.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you for joining. Thank you, Ben.